Hello and welcome to Fast Forward Newsline. My name is Dave Kattenberg. With us today is Rob Schmidt, who is the station manager of CKUW University of Winnipeg Radio, which hosts the production of the Fast Forward Newsline. Thank you so much, Rob.
Oh yeah, no, it's always my pleasure. It's great to do exciting projects like this and bring them to the radio audience and try new things.
You've been involved in campus community radio since when?
1992, I think, is when I got my start at CFMU at McMaster University.
What is campus community radio? Radio listeners out there, we're going to talk in a moment about listening, how people listen, pick up their audio. But people listen to the public broadcaster, to CBC radio, they listen to commercial radio. A lot of people in Canada listen to campus community radio. For those people who aren't tuned in to their local campus community radio, what is a campus community radio station? What is campus community radio all about?
Yeah, well, to those people, I would say you should check it out. You should get a program guide. You should find something that you enjoy, and you should tune in, because campus community radio is listener-driven radio. It's participatory. That's the way I like to describe it. Basically, community radio allows members of the community to come to the station and broadcast their ideas, their passion for music, their thoughts, their expertise, that kind of thing.
So it's open access.
It's public access radio, yeah, and it's tons of fun, and it's also a really great way to learn more about your community by listening. You can hear very interesting events that are happening around your community. You can hear from personalities in your community that might have musical expertise or political insight that you certainly will not find anywhere else.
Now, so the upside is that campus community radio is very diverse by its very nature. If you want to think of there being a downside, it's kind of tends to be often all over the place. And so a person who enjoys listening to their local radio station, they enjoy listening to this show and that show, but as soon as this show or that show is over, the next one comes on and it's completely different and sometimes weird.
Yeah, it's true. It's a little weird sometimes, but that's part of the fun of it. I think most stations have a pretty good program guide, either on their website or something you can pick up from the station that you can use to sort of follow along and guide your listening. And that's really the best way to sort of engage with the station, because there's not a lot of people that tune in all day long, but if you can leave it on and listen, you'll probably learn something or certainly find out about music that you didn't know about before.
And of course, the very nature of it is that if you've got a yen for doing radio, you can come in and with the appropriate training, you can get on the air. How does that work here at CKUW?
Yeah, well, at CKUW, it's pretty easy. You get in touch with us, and we connect you with our volunteer coordinator. We have a series of training workshops because we feel it's really important that all volunteers are educated about the legal obligations. So that includes parts of the Broadcasting Act and our responsibilities to the CRTC. So you sign up, you complete those training workshops, and then we try and find a spot for you to participate in the station, whether that's working in our music collection and keeping that current by cataloging music as it comes in, or collaborating with other volunteers to create a radio program, or making a show on your own. If you have an idea, if you come with an idea fully formed, we can help turn that into a program that you would come in and do every week.
Now, the broadcasting environment has changed radically since the mid-1990s when you got involved, and since 1978 when I got involved. There wasn't internet back then. People had AM and FM radios, and they listened to them. Tell me, Rob, how you see radio and the campus community radio endeavor having changed in the years that you've been involved, and how is it kind of changing now? I would imagine the change is kind of accelerating almost.
Yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't. I don't like to waffle on things, but a lot of people still listen to radio. There's not a lack for an audience. What the real challenge is standing out among the options that are out there.
Incredible fragmentation.
Yes. Well, you look at Winnipeg, when CKUW went on the air, there were 8, 10 FM stations. Now there's 15 or so. So even in the time we've been on air, there's like a 30% increase in your FM options alone. Add to that your internet options, add to that options beyond audio, and it's the amount of personal choice now is staggering. The great thing is that radio offers something that a lot of these other services just can't compete with, which is to say, we have real people in the studio. We have live people from the community creating programming, and that's not something that can be replicated easily on a stream, certainly not from a stream that's coming from California or Europe or anywhere like that.
And you mentioned the internet. Of course, I suppose most internet broadcasting we associate with podcasts, and there must be a gazillion podcasts out there.
Yeah.
And lots of people listen to their favorite podcasts. They don't tune into the radio anymore.
Yeah, I don't know that people don't tune into the radio anymore, because what radio is really good at is stuff that's happening right now. A podcast is great about specific topics or specific information, but it's not about what's happening right now. And radio is excellent at what's live, what's happening right now. And that's where what I was saying earlier, if you want to connect to your community, find out what's happening right now in your community, then your community radio station is a great place to do that, because the people there are talking about the bands that are playing that weekend. They're talking about political events or activities that are happening right away. And you simply don't get that on a podcast or on a stream from another location.
Tell me about this movement, Rob, to get the chip companies to the providers, the telecom providers, to switch on the little FM buttons on those chips. What's this all about?
Well, it's pretty interesting. I mean, we have a lot of people nowadays, so lots of people still listen to radio, but more and more people don't actually own radios. And so where they're listening is in a car, or they're hearing it at a radio at home, but they don't have a portable radio like we had 10 years ago with Walkmans or things like that.
Walkmans, I remember those.
Yeah, no, classic.
People are listening now going, what the heck is a Walkman?
Well, and before that, the transistor radio that you took to the beach, right? And tuned into the hit station on the beach.
Or under the covers.
Or under the covers, exactly. So, I mean, but what everyone does have, or what many people have, are portable computers that are incredibly powerful. And all of these devices, smartphones, etc., they have chips in them that receive radio waves. That's how they communicate on the internet. Those chips are able to receive FM radio waves as well, but they're not typically turned on by the companies that create the devices or the companies that are marketing them and selling them. So what that means is, if you want to listen to CKUW on your smartphone, you've got to get a special app, and then that goes onto your data plan, and you're basically listening over the internet on your device. The problem, though, is that if the internet is down, you can't hear this signal, even though it's actually surrounding you all the time on FM. So there's issues there for emergency alerting. There's also issues with just trying to make sure that FM radio, that broadcast is easy to receive, and that the investment we put into our transmitter isn't just a waste, right? So private industry, the CBC in Canada, and community radio stations are starting to lobby the government to have the FM chips turned on.
The Canadian government.
That's right. Yeah, it's also being done in the US, but for it to happen in Canada, the Canadian government would basically have to pass regulation.
And that's the CRTC.
Yeah, it would be through the CRTC or possibly Industry Canada. I'm not sure which branch specifically, but they would have to pass a requirement to the cell phone manufacturers, the companies, that if the device is to be sold in Canada, the FM chip must be enabled and must be able to be accessed by the computer.
And where does this movement stand now? How close are we to seeing that actually happening?
It's really, in Canada, it's at just the beginning phases. In the US, it's been ongoing for a couple of years where there's been discussion about it, but it hasn't come to any lawmaking or decision yet. I think in Canada, it'll probably take another couple of years before the movement reaches the government, before a bill is crafted and put into place and that kind of regulation. Because whether it needs to be done through legislation or regulation, that all needs to be figured out first. But I think, for the private broadcasters, for the CBC, it's very attractive to all of a sudden have a much larger audience of FM receivers out there, because the infrastructure is already there for FM broadcasting. And if everyone already has a receiver, it's just not wired up, then it's kind of silly. We should just turn them on.
Is the quality of campus community radio programming improving, Rob, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean...
And you go to conferences every year. There are campus community radio conferences every year where folks get together from across the country and talk about their work and their programming, so one can get a sense of how things are improving or not. I assume they are improving. Are they improving? Is broadcasting getting better?
Well, I think our stations have all, there's been a movement of professionalism in community radio and in campus radio, setting higher standards for volunteers and things like that. We still rely on volunteers to create the shows, so there's always going to be, people who don't have the experience or the training that you would find on private radio in charge of the broadcast, and that's a great thing because sometimes that can be super fun. I think overall, though, you're hearing from community stations across Canada, you're hearing better produced programming, you're hearing programming with more in-depth coverage of news and current affairs than you have in the past, and you're hearing more connection with the communities that they exist in as well. It's not just, a solitary music fan sitting in front of a microphone rambling on about a band that broke up 10 years ago. Because of the nature of culture today, it's much easier to connect to those communities. It's much easier to have a better dialogue on the air, even in community radio.
People listening to this, watching this, Rob, where can they find CKUW, University Winnipeg Radio, on their dial and on the internet? Yes, in Winnipeg, we're at 95.9 FM, and if you live within the city of Winnipeg, within the Perimeter Highway, you should be able to pick us up on your receivers. If you have any trouble, you can contact us at the station and we'll help you with tuning. On the internet, you can find us at ckuw.ca. We have streams there so you can listen. We have podcasts of all of our locally produced programming, so you could download those and listen at your leisure when the time permits. And if you want to find out more about community radio where you live, you should, across the country, you should check out the NCRA, the National Campus Community Radio Association. Their website has a listing of stations across Canada, including their websites, their frequencies, and program guides and information like that. Rob Schmidt, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Thanks. It's been great. You've been watching Fast Forward Newsline here at the Green Planet Monitor. We come your way quite periodically right inside this little box. We are generously supported by the Government of Canada, the Social Justice Fund of Unifor, and the Community Radio Fund of Canada, which actually supports the Fast Forward Newsline project. My name's Dave Kattenberg. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.